Hello, welcome to Casual Veteran Gamer. In the video today, I'm going to be looking at the Dwarf and Halfling races and what sort of things you can do with them when you're in character creation. I'm going to start with the Dwarfs. There are two subraces of Dwarfs. So there are two subraces of Dwarf, Gold Dwarf and Shield Dwarf. Before looking at the differences between the two Dwarfs, we can look at the race features that all Dwarfs get because they are Dwarfs. So starting with Dwarf and Resilience, you have advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance against poison damage. I found that poison didn't come up that often during the playthrough in early access. Maybe it comes up later. It's just something good to have though, a nice advantage to have. Constitution +2, I'll come back to that later, but obviously that's their main modifier bonus. Then proficiency in 4 different weapons: battle axe, hand axe, light hammer and war hammer. I can't say I'm massively impressed with these. Battle axe is okay because it's versatile, so you can have it one-handed or two-handed, which is alright. But almost everyone gets hand axe proficiency already because it's a simple weapon, I believe. Now, light hammer and war hammer, I barely see any of these weapons in the game anyway, and there are probably other options to take. So I'm not so in favour of these particular weapons. And all dwarfs get dark vision, which is always useful. Now, come back to this Constitution +2. It's kind of a downside that it's Constitution +2 as the race bonus, because there are no classes here that directly benefit for their attacks or their spells from Constitution. Obviously, everyone benefits from having higher Constitution. You get more hit points, which is nice. It's not bad, but it's not like Strength or Dexterity or Intelligence, Wisdom or Charisma, where they can affect the attacks or spells for specific classes. I'd rather this Constitution was as the subrace. Now, starting with the Gold Dwarf, since it's what I'm already on, their subrace traits. So your hit point maximum increases by 1, and it increases 1 again every time you gain a level. This is pretty decent. Extra hit point for every level. Considering some classes don't have very many hit points, this can help increase your hit points compared to what you would otherwise get. Base racial speed is 25, which is actually the same for all of the races and subraces I'm looking at today. So it's a bit slower. There's a downside to playing one of the shorter races. And Wisdom +1, so having this Wisdom +1 would mean that you'd make a decent cleric, maybe a ranger, but the downside with this is that using a dwarf as a ranger at level 1, like character creation, means that your maximum dexterity can't be 16, which is probably what you're going to be using to attack. Moving on to the shield dwarf, there it is, 25 feet movement speed. Strength +2. This is obviously good if you're going to be a fighter, or anyone who's not using a finesse melee weapon. So, well, yeah, probably fighters. You could probably make this work with a thief, maybe a ranger. But strength, the primary class is strength 4 is the fighter, which is slightly disappointing because the other subrace traits they get are light armor and medium armor proficiencies, which fighters get anyway. So if you're taking the strength +2 for your fighter, just bear in mind that you've kind of got some wasted subrace traits. I did actually take this for my fighter, because the one benefit of this strength here is it's +2 rather than +1, which gets you some extra ability points at level 1, which is why I took it in the end. Let's quickly look at the ability points. So this is with the shield dwarf. Let's just say I'm going to be a fighter. Let's just change the class to fighter for the sake of it. Fighter abilities. I don't need wisdom. So what this means, it's very easy to have +3 ability modifier in strength and constitution, and +2 in dexterity. This is why I chose this subrace for my fighter, is because of that extra ability point. Because without that one extra point, I would have to, let's actually just quickly go back to that there. Bring that down. I can't get to 16. Right, it's impossible. I've only got one extra point to add, and that has to go somewhere down here. Intelligence, wisdom or charisma, it doesn't matter which one. I mean, that's the other downside of not using the shield dwarf, the gold dwarf for a fighter, is I can't get my strength up to 16. So there is actually a good reason to pick the shield dwarf, being that you get more ability points at level 1. Something I want to point out for both races is that neither the dwarf or halfling get anything past level 1. This is all we get. What we see here is what you get. That's it. Choices are locked in. On to the halfling then. There are two subraces of halfling, Strongheart and Lightfoot halflings. And I've got to say, their race features and subrace traits look a little bare, a little barren. There's 2 here and 3 there. When we look at basically every other race and subrace, although the tiefling isn't far off, right? They get loads of stuff, it looks like, even the human. But let's have a look at these anyway. So lucky, when you roll a 1 for an attack roll, ability check or saving throw, you can reroll the die and must use the new roll. I'm not certain this is actually working, because when I was playing through using a halfling for a rogue, it was, and I was looking at what rolls were made, I didn't see if the results were re-rolled or not. So I can see results, but there's no indication whether they were re-rolled, and I've just got a feeling maybe they weren't. So at the moment, I'm not sure this is working. The other race feature all halflings get is dexterity +2, which is a good stat to have because of the 7 previous videos. Can help increase armor class and your initiative and anything to do with finesse or ranged weapons. And so what classes could we pick? With dexterity +2, a fighter could be okay, especially if we're using a finesse weapon. Ranger this would work for, rogue this will work for as well. So 3 different classes. Considering there are only 6 classes at the moment, that's a pretty good number of classes to be good to be a good choice with. So back to here, and there we are, the Strongheart halfling, same thing there. So the Lightfoot halfling, their subrace traits, naturally stealthy, so they get proficiency in stealth. It's always nice to have an extra proficiency. It means if you get that proficiency from another source, you can choose something else. Maybe choose a different background. Base facial speed is 25 and charisma +1. In terms of combat, this charisma +1 is not useful unless you're a warlock. Obviously outside of combat, it will help with conversations. So I know different types of players out there. Some of you hate combat almost. This just gets in the way of the story. And for other people, the story gets in the way of the combat. So it just kind of depends what sort of player you are. And Strongheart halfling, dexterity +2. It's almost like a mixture between a halfling and a dwarf. So yeah, legends say Dwarf and Blood gave Stronghearts their hardiness because they've got resistance to poison damage and advantage on saving throws against poison, which is what all dwarfs have. And then they've got Constitution +1, which links in with the dwarf's base Constitution, base ability bonus. So Strongheart halfling, pretty much the same choices as the Lightfoot halfling. Oh, sorry, something I missed out is the Lightfoot halfling would make a good warlock because of this extra charisma. The dexterity also definitely helps for reasons mentioned earlier. The Strongheart halfling, however, the extra bonus they get to their ability is Constitution, which doesn't lend itself to being any particular class, so you're kind of limited to the classes that use dexterity a lot. As I said, when I made my rogue, I used a halfling. I did use a Strongheart halfling. That's because I got extra dexterity. I was hoping lucky was working. I'm not sure it really was. And just having resistance against poison damage, which will come up when you're fighting mostly spiders, potentially. And extra Constitution means I could have put my Constitution up to 16 from the beginning. So I could have, let's just have a quick check, look at this. Don't need strength necessarily. This is what I did. Strength +13, not a bad strength to have. And then dexterity and constitution at +3 each. So I got maximum attack damage, maximum to hit bonus, maximum armor class I could get as a rogue, and also the maximum number of hit points, which is why I chose the Strongheart halfling. Final thoughts then, starting with dwarfs. So with this constitution +2, it's good, it's good for any class, but your choice of class is really going to be determined by the proficiency. It's determined by the extra ability score you get from your subrace. So I find these quite limiting and being synergistic with the class. So I'm not a great fan of the dwarf at the moment. Plus the fact that these weapon proficiencies aren't amazing. I've stayed away from dwarfs for almost every character of mine, I think. Apart from a fighter for the shield dwarf. For any other class, I wouldn't consider taking a dwarf personally. I'd pick a different race for sure. So yeah, I'm not really sold on dwarfs that much, apart from shield dwarf being a fighter. final thoughts on halflings. This dexterity +2 really is good because there are lots of different classes you can use, or lots of different classes you can be using this ability. Lucky, if it's working, is great. If it's not, then it's early access. Hopefully, if it's not, it will get fixed. In between these two, I mean, this Constitution +1 is going to be useful for any class that uses dexterity also. Whereas this Charisma +1 will lend itself to being a warlock, but not really much else in terms of survivability in combat. So for me, I think the Strongheart Halfling wins out. If you think I missed anything out, please leave a comment below, or if you disagree with something I've said. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and do please consider subscribing, as they are all appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.